Welcome to another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast, Take Two. My name is Phil Thompson.
And I'm Steve Lacy.
Steve, how are you today?
I'm doing good. We're having a good time here. We got through some of our previous recording, realizing we forgot to push the record button.
Forgot to push the record button.
Such a good mood.
Yeah.
Yes. So what's going on today?
Well, what's going on today, and I actually am recording this time. For those of you behind the scenes, we've been doing this for well over 10 years, and this has only happened a few times, so it's happened recently. We have a special guest today. Our special guest is Barney Murray, and Barney is an old friend of ours, gone back a long time. He's the associate pastor of Gideon Full Gospel Church here in Tucson, Arizona. He's also the president of the Arizona Christian Men's Fellowship, also director of East Point High School, Tucson East. There's a program there called the Rise Up program. Barney's been in education for a long time and been in ministry from White Plains, New York. Barney, how are you today?
I'm doing absolutely great, and thank you so much for having me today.
Well, it's always good to see you, and we need to see you more often. But Barney, I was looking at, I was browsing through Facebook, and you and I are friends on Facebook. You haven't blocked me yet. Not sure why, but because most people do. But you had something there called the living room, and I looked at it a little closer, and I thought, the living room, what is this? And it's very interesting. I think people involved in ministry who are listening to this podcast or viewing us right now might find this really a very interesting tool, and something that might really just help a lot of people. So I'm going to turn things over to Steve Lacy here, and we want to find out more about the living room and really what makes it so unique. Steve?
Yeah, so I guess the first question is, what is the living room and how did it begin? What was the idea behind it and what is it?
The living room is actually a living room, but it's not in anyone's house. It's in a small strip mall here in Tucson, and it evolved out of the Christian Men's Fellowship. It's kind of an extension. There was working with adolescent youth and mentoring, and then church folks, and then the Christian Men's Fellowship. Being that it was a citywide thing, I needed a place where I could take anybody and feel comfortable and, having them relax. I can't take everybody to my house. The missus would not permit that. And so I wanted a place where that was neutral, that was comfortable, that gave you the feeling of being invited to my house, but free enough to relax, chill, and talk without the, I don't want to say stigma, but the feelings that go along with having to go to church and those kind of things. So I wanted a neutral place, like a living room, that we could sit down and talk about anything and everything, depending on who the audience was, without feeling judged or can I really say that here, and that kind of thing.
And so, I'm sorry to cut you off, but what you've got here, and if people are watching a video, the background you've got is the actual photos from the living room. I mean, what you've set up it looks and feels like a real living room in somebody's home with all sorts of amenities, right? I mean, refrigerators and things like that.
It's got seating for about 13. There's 3 big sofas in there. There's a refrigerator, microwave, big screen TV, sound system, laptops, you name it. It's in there. And it's kind of trippy because where it's located, you have no clue. You're going in the side door and you walk into the living room. So it has that kind of impact and has that kind of feel of it immediately. So
you mentioned it's in a strip mall.
Mm-hmm.
And so Yeah, it's like walking into another world then, I would think,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
It's
right
kind of a
next door
shock.
to the auto parts store, and all of a sudden I step through this doorway and I'm in this very comfortable living room. That's
Yeah.
great.
What makes this
So,
different? I'm stepping on Steve here, but I'll just jump. I'll just keep going here. That's the thing about doing this on Zoom now during this pandemic is usually when Steve and I would do a podcast, we'd be sitting together and we would kind of get body language from each other. It's a little harder to do when we're remote. But what makes this different, Barney? What makes the living room different than just like like a little Bible study or a little small group meeting? What makes the living room so unique?
The fact that it is a living room, the fact that it's not going to church. Again, because a lot of the operations, the things that happen around church and even Bible studies, fellowships, happens at the physical church. Um, and the reality that not everyone, when you start thinking about discipleship, when you start thinking about, I'm going to invite my friends, some of them may not be comfortable with going to church with you. They love you and everything, but that kind of will make them a little uneasy. So the living room is uh, even though the purpose is the same, it takes the edge off of feeling I have to look, dress, say things a certain way. Um, it's almost like you could get into the living room and we could be talking about scripture or whatever and life circumstances, and you slip up and cuss, and they're not going to throw you on the altar because there is none.
yeah.
So not that it's permissible or appropriate, only because of the other people, but it is a place where you can be you without the feeling that I can say something wrong.
What a concept. Gee, what a concept. And I'll get on soapbox here and I'll get off it in a second here. But I mean, my goodness, why can't we just be that way in church? Hello. I mean, that's the thing that bugs me about certain groups. We have all these rules, in Christianity, and oh my goodness, how dare you step over a rule? But what you're talking about here is you can be free to be yourself. I mean, you need to be respectful of people. We're not talking about being idiots here, but you can be who you are without the fear of judgment, probably,
Yep.
without the fear of guilt and condemnation.
Exactly. And so it's like when you invite someone into your home, even your house has house rules. But when you're trying to reach people, and this is kind of like a buffer zone, an introductory place for Christian and non-Christian, where we can dialogue and have questions that and stop, because the agenda is communication and conversation, living room style, difference of opinion. There have been sessions we've had where there is no right answer, but we hear each other out. And when you start hearing the heart of people, where they are, because they feel safe enough to reveal that to you, then you've done something. You've done something. So I found that the physical space does make the difference. I can get some of my kids from school to go to the living room where I can't get them to go to church, and tell them the same thing. But somehow it works. It's become a discipleship tool, and that's at one end. But on the natural side, it's just a fun place to be. The only thing I don't have in there is a PlayStation.
So how the reception, I take it, has gone fairly well. Has there been some, I mean, you have stories of fruits of the setting this thing up, lives changed, or just anything that unusual that's happened or remarkable that's happened within the living room that
Probably
you could
one of
share?
the the most significant things is that being a living room is open to, like I said, adolescents all the way through adult men. And we've had studies and book studies for just about every group. We had a women's group there that did a study, and probably the most significant thing, two of the girls that invited to participate were students of mine. And so I picked them up, and they needed a ride. So I went to pick them up and took them to the living room, and I had to leave, and I did. But within a week, it was those two girls, their mother and their grandmother, sitting in the living room going through a study together. Wow, led by another woman. And so the need for this kind of space, and I use the word safe, where you can be transparent, where you can be real. There's boxes of tissues all over the place, because there have been some soul searching, some reality checks that have taken place that have resulted in a pivotal relation to an individual that, okay, I see what I need to do. And I appreciate the fact that I don't have to do it alone. So it's been quite powerful.
So one of the big questions, and there's probably lots of answers here, logistics. I mean, how do I schedule it? Does another group come in while I'm having a group? Who cleans the place? Who pays for the place? All those sort of things. Can you give a little background on that part of it?
And it has been hit by the pandemic as well. The Christian Men's Fellowship has a monthly breakfast on a rotating basis. And so it's not at the same church every month. So we've extended that to a first and a third Saturday every month. And we're hovering about 18 breakfasts a year. And so at each breakfast, there's an offering taken, and that offering is split between the Christian Men's Fellowship and the host church. So that has kind of subsidized the living room and the cost. But since the pandemic, we have kind of lost that. So I have a few friends who are assisting me with maintaining it. We're not in there anymore. It still exists, it's still there. We're looking forward to getting back in there. But that was when we switched to the internet to start to have our meetings, conversations, book studies on Zoom. And it happens two ways. Zoom is something that is going to be somewhat restrictive in that to keep the intimacy and privacy, so it's not open to the public. But also, and I think this is where what you saw on Facebook was the Facebook Live feeds that are for the general public. It's discussing topics that I am led to bring forward. We talk about some of the taboo topics to bring them to light. Taboo in the sense that you're just not going to hear it. And it goes back to what Phil was saying earlier.
What are some of those topics? Just I mean, what are they? What are some? I mean, you don't have to get into detail, but I mean, the topics that you guys are covering. I mean, you're probably talking racism. You're probably talking some of the. Do you guys ever get into politics? You know, I'm fascinated by this because to me, it's all about environment, and also I think it also has to do with the person hosting this because, you know, you're a very hospitable person. I know you. And so I think just people being around you, I don't know you that well, but I know you enough that people feel comfortable around you and opening up. So so these topics, tell us maybe just a couple of them.
They vary. We have talked about when a man comes to himself, was the title of one, and that is the challenges a man goes through when he decides to change. What's the process for him? The next one we have coming up is from a friend of mine who was a prison hostage, and now he's a leadership executive. So how does he go from a prison hostage? And there's a spiritual and a Christian element to his testimony. So he wrote a book coming up in the near future of how my experience with men impacted my view of God. And that's coming from a woman who has had several somewhat toxic relationships with men,
Sure.
starting with her father, and how that impacted her view of her father, her heavenly father.
Yeah.
Then one of them is, this was kind of crazy, but we've been dealing with God's design for man. And the title of the session is, Hey, Adam, you still missing a rib? And that's dealing with a man's need for intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we're dealing with real life issues. We've had anger management. We've had broken men trying to love an unbroken woman. All kinds of things that are in the back of our mind. The importance of mental health and how it manifests itself in a godly man who's not free to talk about that because it doesn't come up in church. So we try to find the discussion is probably 90% natural and real. And the last part of it is a spiritual solution to it.
Mm-hmm. This reminds me of something, so I used to smoke cigars, and I know that comes to a shock, I'm sure, to lots of people. But there's a cigar shop in Tucson. Actually, there's several, but there's one where you could go in and buy a cigar, and you could go in the lounge area in couches, and they'd provide you something to drink, and you could sit there and enjoy a good cigar. Mm-hmm. I know this may be offending some people, but I had some great conversations with people when I would go in there and just sit and they'd have a TV on, big TV or something, low, and I would have discussions with people that were wonderful discussions as we puffed on our, $15 cigars, and it didn't do that very often because $15 cigars, but and there were natural flowing discussions that turned spiritual at some point. I mean, not every one of them, but a lot of them. Yeah. Again, it reminds me of the environment and the freedom and the ability to let your guard down. And then, you obviously you need to trust people a little bit. And in your situation there with the living room, I'm assuming there's something there about confidentiality.
Yes.
But that's what it kind of reminds me of a little bit.
It does, in that there are some conversations that are organic, that just come out of conversation. But we're finding that, and this is where I'm kind of the instigator, is when I have a conversations with 2 or 3, whether it be children, women, or men, and I hear a common thread, then that's something that needs to be talked about. Those 3 or 4 people will not talk to each other, but they'll talk to me. One of my friends said, I don't know how you do it, but you can say things to people and get away with it when it would get me beat up. And so I think it's a gift. And so when I feel and sense a thread, people are starving for a relationship. And so the last thing has been fatherlessness, the impact that it has on the family, the sons and the daughters and the wives. and the family as a whole. And so when I hear that and guy says, how do I do that? How do I turn it around? Then it ends up in the living room and he finds out he's not the only one. And not that I provide the solution. A lot of the times the solution comes from the conversation. And then we might throw in a scripture or two, because knowing what to do, knowing how to do it, and then having the strength and the courage to do it is where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. We mentioned in our prior recording, this, what it reminds me of is, I read a book on the guy that founded Starbucks, and he was mentioning there's the home and there was the office, and he wanted to create an environment that was not the home and not the office, and someplace in between where people could hang out. And they created a whole, I don't know, a genre or whatever, a whole thing of, you go hang out at places like Phil talked about the cigar place. It's a similar kind of thing. So this is not the church. This is not the home. This is not the counseling center. This is a safe place in between all that has been, I guess, well received here. So you mentioned that the physical facility is not being used during COVID, and you've moved it online. I assume we're continuing on and currently on Zoom?
Yes. If things work out, we might be back in there in the summer.
Okay.
But regardless of whether we can reopen the physical space, we will resume our internet real estate, Zoom, StreamYard, or whatever we decide to run with, because of the response from the internet. People have jumped in, joined in, commented in, and when a video gets 200 or 300 views, then it's something that you're reaching right. People that may not come to the living room physically, and certainly may not come to the church for whatever reason. But the issues and life circumstances don't go away. So we're looking to help people be better.
So kind of back on my logistics questions here. With the physical facility, can I just show up? Do I need a key? Do I need an invitation? How do people learn about it? How does that work how did it work prior to COVID with the physical living room?
I'm the gatekeeper.
Okay.
And so I pretty much managed it, or still do, manage the room, scheduling it. And the people that are in there are people usually I have asked to facilitate a study or to chair a conversation or what have you. So it kind of, it's not open, well, it's open to the general public, but it's not a place that you can just rent. Right. We have, and part of the reason is that besides the insurance side of it, we have prayed over the room, had the pastors have come in and bless it, that the function and everyone who came into it did not leave the same. So we're trying to protect the environment that we've, and keep it so a place that God can live there and invite everybody in, and that they don't leave the same. So we have to kind of maintain its sacredness.
Right, I can see that. So if there's a bunch of kids that want to have a spring break party, probably not going to call you up and say, let's have it at the living room. It's going to be more of a structured, curated environment than just a random facility that looks like somebody's living room that I could use. That makes a lot of sense. I'm just poking at these questions. If there's churches out there that say, hey, wow, our community could really leverage, a living room, and what would be the first steps to, get it going, and how do I manage it, and how do I prevent things from going wrong? are getting out of control. So it sounds like you've got some experience there.
Oh yeah. And it works out really well. The thing that I've seen a lot of churches do, they have put, if they had the facilities and the space, set aside a place to kind of build a living room lounge type of atmosphere. But you're still going to church. You're just sitting in a couch instead of a pew. And I have found that it's a whole different feeling when you're going to the living room than going to church. And people separated. It's just a totally different vibe to it.
Right. So that sets the tone for people opening up more and discussing things that they normally might not discuss with others. So yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And you have people helping you too, right? I mean, you have leaders. You're the gatekeeper, you're the host, so to speak, but you have other people that kind of understand this vision that are helping.
Yes. There's I thank God for the pastors that have come on board with it and do support. We could always use financial support, but the vision and the need, starting to, especially now that we've gone online, that to expand, and I don't want to be the bottleneck in that. I can bring people together, but I don't feel the responsibility to feed everybody, especially when there are people who are gifted in certain areas, and I'm not. So I'm not going to front. I'm just going to find somebody who has done the time and can talk about the transition back into society than for me to read a book about it. So I use real people within their callings so that they have the maximum impact. I'm not a thug. I don't know anything about that. But if the young men are struggling with a life in Christ or the life with a gang because of the absence of family, then I can get them to the room. Almost guarantee you I can do that. But once they are there, the truth that they need has to come from an expert. Mm-hmm. And I'm not that.
So we're about out of time here, Barney, but you mentioned you guys may start meeting in here in the summer, with the pandemic hopefully dying down here a little bit. Are you still going to be doing stuff online?
For sure.
So meeting in person, but also online.
Oh, yeah. And the stuff that goes online will be more at a higher level, where in the living room, it could be at the intimate level.
Right. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can people get a hold of you, Barney? We're talking to Barney Murray here, and we're talking about the living room. How can people get a hold of you if they want to kind of explore this a little bit more? Maybe, people are listening here all over the world, 5 or 6 of them anyhow. And so how can they get a hold of you? Maybe if they want more information, as Steve mentioned earlier, you're like, this is an idea maybe our ministry could do, or maybe somebody listening. So I could maybe do this. What's the process of getting a hold of you?
You can call me directly on my mobile phone at 520-390-4723.
All right. Now, you sure you want to put that out there?
Huh?
390-4721. Is that what you just said? Or did I get
520-390-4723.
Oh, 23. Okay.
4723. Or email Barney at TucsonCMF.org.
All right.
That's TucsonCMF for Christian Men's Fellowship.org.
All right. Sounds good to me. Barney Murray has been our guest. We need to have you back on again. I always say this to our guests, and we'll definitely have you back on again. I think this is a fascinating idea. I think it can reach a lot of people. And I just think it's it's not to use this term out of the box too much, but it's out of the box. I mean, it's just different than what a lot of ministries or churches might think about doing when they're trying to reach people. I like the idea, and I think it's a great concept, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it continues to progress.
I appreciate that.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. All right. Well, we're done here. Steve, thanks for your input today and your questions.
Great to be here.
All right.
Thanks, Steve. And thanks, Phil, for the opportunity. And until the next time.
All right. And I am Phil Thompson. Thank you for listening to the Church Solutions podcast or watching us on YouTube or at streamingchurch.tv. If we can help you in any way, please reach out to us. We're all about helping churches, not just with technology, but even something like this, helping people connect with each other and grow spiritually. Take care of yourselves. We'll catch you again next time on another edition